2, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check, check, check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check.
Yeah, anasema iko sawa.
Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2.
Okay.
Testing 1, 2.
So good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all of you joining us on United Nations Web Television. Welcome to the closing press conference for the fourth meeting of the subsidiary body of implementation of the Convention on Biological Diversity. We're here at the United Nations office in Nairobi, completing this meeting. The final plenary for this meeting will take place in just a brief period of time. I'm delighted to have with me for this closing press conference the chair of the fourth meeting, Mr. Chira Achalendra Reddy from India. He's been our able chair for these days. And beside him is the acting executive secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Mr. David Cooper. So we'll have some brief remarks from each of them, and then we'll be taking questions from reporters here in Nairobi. So gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you. So Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. David. I am very delighted to participate in this press conference. I am happy that Acting Executive Secretary David Cooper also joined us. Members of the press, this has been a week of intense discussions, which have almost touched the foundations of implementations of Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Let me begin by thanking the parties for their commitment to the convention as demonstrated by their engagement during the negotiations held this week. While we have many issues to resolve, the foundation is laid for our discussions in the coming Conference of Parties, 16th Conference of Parties, to be held at Cali, Colombia, later this year. We conclude our 10-day meeting with substantial progress in many agenda items. Central to our discussions here are our actions to achieve Goal D of the plan to invest and collaborate for nature. The meeting will forward the draft decisions to COP16, especially on resource mobilization and technical and scientific cooperation. Friends, let me remind you that the financial ambitions set out in the plan include investing US $200 billion a year from all sources and reforming the harmful subsidies to an extent of $500 billion. This was also clearly mentioned in our Kunming targets, 23 targets mentioned in the Kunming-Montreal Global, which form the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Here at SBI-4, governments considered parameters for their own national biodiversity finance plans, the role of multilateral development banks, existing UN initiatives, private finance, and the possibilities from a mechanism for sharing the vast monetary benefits derived from expected to be derived from digital sequence information. As you may know, the mechanism is under still negotiation. Discussions also address the working of the possible global biodiversity fund, including the role of global environment facility. There is a need for technical and scientific cooperation to support the implementation of the convention and its protocols, and the biodiversity plan were also considered. This need will be achieved by establishing regional and sub-regional technical cooperation centers, please. During the meeting, the Bureau of the Conference of the Parties selected regional organizations worldwide to foster and facilitate technical and scientific cooperation to help halt and reverse the biodiversity loss by 2030. As we all know, implementation of biodiversity plan, that is Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, at national levels used to be shaped by national biodiversity strategy and action plans. These the parties are expected to submit the NBSAPs, which are called, by COP16, as per the templates and as per the guidance provided by the Secretariat to Convention on Biological Diversity. These will translate the plan's 23 action targets into national priorities. Here in Nairobi, governments explored how to complete this by COP16, or alternatively how parties can submit aligned national targets. The meeting also looked at the ways that the contributions of stakeholders such as indigenous peoples and local communities, women, youth, and business, and civil society, and also the contributions can be tracked and included so that the mechanism to implement the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework becomes very robust and result-oriented. We look forward to the next meeting of the subsidiary body and implementation, which is the fifth one, which will take place immediately before COP16. So, friends, thank you very much for this nice, interacting with the press. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll turn the floor over now to the Acting Executive Secretary to make a few remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Dr. Reddy, and good afternoon, everyone. So this fourth meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation of the Convention on Biological Diversity has been an incredibly busy one, a very intense one. We have made progress on a number of issues. Some of the other issues will have to make further progress at the COP in Cali, Colombia later. But I want to highlight in particular some areas of progress. And these really are all part of the package of measures that were adopted alongside the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework at COP15 in Montreal. Alongside the framework was adopted a monitoring framework and a process for planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. So this is to ensure, first of all, that the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, or the Biodiversity Plan, that the targets of that are translated into national targets and integrated into national biodiversity strategies and action plans, or NBSAPs. And then that parties can report on progress. First, in terms of their commitments, and that will happen at COP16, and then later in terms of the actual progress on the ground to meeting those, and the first review of that will be at COP17. So the broad elements of this review process were agreed in Montreal already, but there are some details that are still to be finalized. And important progress was made on that matter this week, and that complements the important progress made last week at the conventions, or the week before, I should say now, at the convention's scientific body, SBSTA, on the indicator framework. So that's the first key area, I think, where we've seen a lot of progress. The second, and this was already highlighted by Dr. Reddy, is further work to advance the network of technical and scientific cooperation centres at the global, regional and sub-regional levels. There's been important discussions on that. We also saw the approval by the Bureau of the Conference of the Parties a few days ago of the list of regional and sub-regional technical and scientific cooperation centres. These are centres around the world that will help countries have access to the expertise that they need to implement the framework, and we envisage that this set of sectors will grow into a network involving many more centres at the regional, sub-regional and national levels. So this is an important step forward. What is left for COP is to decide the shape of the global coordination mechanism for that network. The other big issue on the agenda here was resource mobilization. This is, as Dr. Reddy also mentioned, is an incredibly key issue. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the Biodiversity Plan, sets some ambitious targets for mobilizing financial resources. And of course, the way those are mobilized and the way they're channeled to support countries is also important. The meeting this week made advances on updating the Convention's own strategy for resource mobilization, and in setting out the options for how resources may be mobilized, whether or not we need to establish a new fund. So it set out options for moving forward on that issue, which will be a key issue of discussion at COP 16. Then on the margins of this meeting, we saw a number of advances as well. I already mentioned the approval of the list of technical and scientific cooperation centres. We also saw yesterday in Beijing the establishment of the Kunming Biodiversity Fund. And this is a fund that will be promoted by a number of UN agencies, including UNEP and the CBD Secretariat, with resources from China to support, again, countries in implementing the decisions taken at COP 15 and further decisions that may be taken by the COP in the future, again, to implement the biodiversity plan. We also had, in the last few days, a number of informal consultations on indigenous peoples and local communities, or as we say into the Convention, Article 8J of the Convention. COP 16 is due to adopt a new programme of work on the role of indigenous peoples and local communities, how their rights can be further respected and how they can have a leading role in implementing the biodiversity plan. And there were important discussions on that topic this week in an informal group. In another informal briefing, there was useful discussions on the process that is underway to operationalize the multilateral mechanism for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits on digital sequence information from genetic resources and a global fund. The final operationalization of this mechanism will be one of the key issues at COP 16. We will have in August in Montreal a meeting, the second meeting of the Intergovernmental Working Group on this issue that will advance this agenda. And then just finally, as the chair mentioned, this body, SBI, will resume just before COP 16. Its job will be to look This will be just before the deadline, really, for parties to establish their new national targets and, where possible, to update their national biodiversity strategies and action plans, their NBSAPs. This will be an opportunity to review that progress, to demonstrate that progress, for countries to learn from each other in how they're overcoming the challenges of implementing the biodiversity plan, of achieving, of setting and achieving their national targets. And of course, a few days ago, we also celebrated the International Day for Biodiversity with the theme, Be Part of the Plan. I think what we see here in terms of the participation at SBI with I think probably maybe one of the largest meetings of SBI we've ever had, well over 1,000 participants from, I think, 154 countries. We're seeing more and more interest and engagement from the countries in the work of the convention. Of course, we'll need everyone to be part of the plan if we're going to achieve those ambitious goals and targets. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much, David. And thank you very, very much to the chair for that as well. So we'll open the floor now to questions. Can we get a microphone here up front, please, for Stella? Can we get a microphone up front for Stella? Otherwise, people online won't hear her. Can we get a microphone up here for Stella? Thanks very much. Sorry, Stella, we'll have you just wait a minute. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Cooper. My questions, actually, I'll be asking the questions to both the speakers here. The first question is a bit of clarification on a statement that I heard in the plenary. This was from, I think, the delegate from DRC, and they said that we will need to mobilize 60 billion by 2026, USD 60 billion. I just wanted to confirm if that is correct. And they said that they will need to have text that will reflect also the modalities of mobilizing these resources. So if you could just comment on that. Did I understand it wrong, or is that a correct figure?
So the figures that are actually in the biodiversity plan is to mobilize in total $200 billion per year by 2030 from all sources, and to mobilize at least $30 billion per year in transfers from developed to developing countries. And then there's a near-term target of mobilizing at least 20 billion per year through those channels by 2025. Prior to the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, international financial flows stood at around 10 billion, roughly speaking, per year. And total flows, we don't have accurate figures, but they were probably a little over 100 billion a year. So what the framework is saying is we need to double total biodiversity finance by 2030 and triple those levels coming from developed to developing countries by 2030, and actually to double them by 2025 compared to what we have before. So I think we all know that these figures are well, they're not overestimates of what is needed, let us say. So, countries will vary in what they feel is needed, but the figures in the GBF are the ones that I just gave you. Now, some of those funds that go from developed to developing countries will be channeled through bilateral mechanisms, others through multilateral mechanisms, and including the multilateral development banks, and some through specific funds, such as the Global Environment Facility and its global Biodiversity Framework Fund, the newly established fund. There's also, of course, proposals to set up a completely new fund dedicated to biodiversity as well, and that is under discussion. So some parties believe that is a priority, others don't, and that is the nature of the ongoing discussion. So in summary, the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework, or the Biodiversity Plan, already sets out the total level of ambition in terms of the amounts that should be raised, and that's been agreed. But there's still discussion on on the need of whether or not we should have a new dedicated fund or funds that could complement, for example, the Global Environment Facility.
Okay, so are you saying that the statement that I just mentioned may have been made in a certain context? Is that it? Because I just heard this $60 billion by 2026, and that seemed like a new piece of information to me. So I just wanted to understand how did that figure came up. Yeah. Yes,
I think probably that question you should direct directly to the country that made that suggestion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And to the chair, my question is, so today, now at the end of today, what are we going to expect? Like, are we expecting a single CRP, or are we expecting 4 different CRPs on the core 4 issues of like resource mobilization, mainstreaming, and so on?
Yeah. See, for every agenda item, the CRP will be after discussions, a CRP after making statements, after receiving the statements from the parties, Secretariat with a lot of hard work and taking the core points from the statements made by the parties, they prepare a CRP that is called conference room paper. Then that CRP will be discussed and certain amendments, adjustments will be made because different parties will have different viewpoints on certain issues. Then that will become a L paper. That is a final, limited circulation paper. That also will be placed before in the plenary, final plenary, and then that will become a final that will be discussed in the coming COP. So this is how deliberations, discussions, in a phases it will go, and ultimately it will capture the essence of the discussions in the L paper.
Okay.
This is how the system runs here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for explaining that. Now, you mentioned, both of you mentioned that there will be a SBI-5 just before October. Do we know the venue of that or the dates of that?
Yeah, that is at Kali, same venue where the COP16 is scheduled to be held in October from, if I am not wrong, 21st October to 1st November.
Okay, thank you. David just mentioned that the core focus of that SBI-5 will especially be on the progress made on NBSAP and target setting by the nations. Yeah. Now, considering that the recommendations or the decisions from this SBI will be going straight to the COP, so we are not really expecting any decisions or adoption of anything until the actual COP happens. Countries sit down and negotiate this. So considering this factor, how are we expecting that there will be a significant change in the submission of NBSAP? Because whatever has been decided here, the capacity building or the national or sub-regional, regional cooperation, all of that are now subject to adoption, right? And Kelly.
Yeah. To make things clear, see, every country are not on same page with regard to technical and scientific capabilities. So those things have to be upgraded. That's why there is a proposal for the establishment of regional and sub-regional technical scientific cooperation centers. Okay, that is one aspect. The other aspect which you have mentioned, if I understood properly, the subsidiary body and implementation is one of the permanent wings of the COP, the convention, and it recommends certain decisions after a lot of deliberations. The COP, Conference of Parties, is the governing body of the convention. So decisions, they only can take it. So these refined papers, refined decisions in the draft form will go to COP, Conference of the Parties. That is, then at the end of the COP, there will be high-level segment where the political executive also will generally participate, and they will finally adopt these documents as decisions. Then it will become a decision. Then the decisions, to what extent, for example, this SBI-4, SBI-5, they review the implementation process. What are the problems, what happened, how it can be improved. For example, the system has come out, National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plans are the main tools for the implementation of the framework, that is called Biodiversity Plan. So to what extent, how the countries are progressing, who has submitted the NBSAP, who has not submitted it, what could be the problems, how can we further improvise it, then global analysis, global review will come. So how this time the framework is very sharp compared to previous Aichi targets. They are bringing the uniformity in evaluation of the progress that is going to be made before every COP. That means every 2 years, as you know, the COP meets at one place. So this is how the subsidiary body and implementation would facilitate the governing body, that is Conference of Parties, to the convention in properly getting the information and then analysis and then decisions. So those decisions will be pursued. This is the overall process, please.
Yes, and just maybe to say that, if you like, this body, the subsidiary body and implementation, has two main groups of tasks. So one is to actually review the implementation that's happening, setting of national targets, the NBSAPs, and then eventually the actual actions on the ground that are made when those NBSAPs are implemented. So that review function is ongoing, and that will be the focus of SBI-5. This SBI, under the first agenda item, it looked at this, but more on an interim basis, because we're going to look at it more thoroughly at SBI-5. But it really focused on the other main function of the SBI, which is to help further develop on the one hand, the means of implementation, technical and scientific cooperation, capacity building, finance, and so on, and the mechanisms for reviewing implementation as opposed to the results of reviewing implementation. So that was the main focus of the most of the work at SBI-4. And the reason that we're waiting really to SBI-5 for the main look at how are we doing in implementation is that we know that parties need a bit more time to develop their national targets and to update their NBSAPs. And indeed, that was envisaged at COP15. They were asked to do this before COP16. So far, there's been, I think, 10 or 11 countries that have updated their NBSAPs. We expect the majority, the overwhelming majority of parties to have completed that process before COP16.
Okay, so I think both of you are saying that not all the countries are on the same level. Some may be pretty close to develop and submit their NBSAP. So in the SBI-5, there will be a new a review of what progress has happened in this 4 months between now and October, and so will there be a new set of recommendations again made in SBI-5 in the same regard?
So really, what SBI-5 has to do is to take stock of the progress. Yeah. There could be some recommendations that are developed in the light of that, but the main point is to see what progress has been made and to give an opportunity also for countries to exchange experiences and to learn from one another.
Thank you. I think those were my main questions. But David, you just mentioned taking stock. And it reminds me that very recently, and this is not really directly connected to SBI, but I would ask that question anyway. You mentioned there would be a stock taking very soon. Can you tell us when and where will that stock taking in biodiversity? I mean, in the climate COP, we saw that took place earlier last year, the global stock taking. When will that happen in biodiversity?
Yeah, so, yes. So already at this COP, we'll be looking at the targets that have been set, the commitments that are made. Then at COP17, we'll be looking at that, but then also looking at what is the actual progress towards the targets. So, if you like, COP16, we'll be able to see, okay, do the commitments that have been set, are they, if we add them up as far as we can, are they commensurate with the ambition with the global ambition? Does the national ambition meet the global ambition? At COP17, we'll also start looking at actual progress towards those targets.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry to be asking one other question. I wanted to really quick, sir, Chairman, sorry. Maybe you can say, make a comment on this. Is that David mentioned this informal briefing on DSI. You also just talked about DSI. We know that DSI, the next meeting will be happening in Montreal in August. So what was the nature of the informal meeting, briefing here or discussions here? Yeah.
Though I am not a part of that group, but whatever I understood and I knew, is that they are moving forward how best, the multilateral mechanism of benefit sharing can be facilitated between the users and producers of the digital sequence information. Digital sequence information is dematerialized genetic information from the genetic resources. So to just amplify it, the genetic resource, the technology has developed. Now, that genetic engineering, gene splicing, gene editing, genetically modified organisms, all these, for example, our virus. So how we know that this is a mutant, this is a second mutant, third mutant? By genome sequencing, we know that what is the type of the same organism evolving into different this thing. So this type of information will move virtually, in the sense that through internet, and based on that information is called digital sequence information. So that is the latest. Because of the high technology, this digital sequence information has come into play. Before the advent of the DSI, actual physical genetic resource used to be taken by the users of the genetic resource, like any company is developing vaccine or any new high-yielding seeds or drugs or any other product derived from the biological resources. So the DSI is expected to produce a lot of benefits by utilizing the digital sequence information, and how best the benefits should be plowed back is the challenge before us, because it needs a lot of tracking, tracing is a problem. So they are evolving the procedures between the various users and producers of the digital sequence information. Please, this is nothing but a part of biotechnology, you can say.
Yes.
Yeah.
David, you actually said you identified this as a area where significant progress was made here, or it was an important discussion that took place here. How long will that meeting in Montreal on Nagoya Protocol be?
Yeah, so the meeting in Montreal is under the convention, but it might also contribute to the Nagoya Protocol. It's 1 week. It's the third week of August, and it's a full intergovernmental meeting. It's the open-ended working group on the multilateral mechanism for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from digital sequence information on genetic resources. And it's the second of such meeting and the last one before COP16. So it is due to essentially prepare a recommendation to the COP on how the mechanism that was established in COP15 can be operationalized, including the Global Fund. Between the first and second meetings, there's been a number of informal discussions and technical discussions. There's also been some studies that have been carried out, and they were presented at this informal meeting a few days ago. And then there was some informal discussion. So no negotiations took place here, just some informal discussions and some exchange on technical issues. But we believe that that was very positive, and we expect some positive negotiations when they resume formally in August in Montreal.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank
Good.
you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the chairs. Just to let you know, the closing plenary of the meeting will start at 16:30 local time, so in about an hour and a half from now. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. David, if I may ask you, do we have a press release or a press statement on the Beijing development?
Only some signature of that.
Yes.